To battle an often unseen invader, it's important to not only know where it is, but where it comes from. And we also have to realize that the fight is everyone's responsibility and has no off-season. It's all part of preserving our precious lakes and rivers by changing Minnesota traditions. Across the state of Minnesota and elsewhere, aquatic invasive species are threatening to forever change our precious lakes and rivers, and in the process, take away some of our most prized traditions. Still, most experts agree that it doesn't have to be that way. We simply need to be aware, change a few old habits, and understand that preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species requires everyone working together as a team.
Some challenges are, again, people set in their ways. We find targeting maybe a younger audience. It's amazing how a young child, because they're so open to new ideas, can then start reminding, their parents or grandparents of, hey, but you shouldn't do that, and start changing that whole culture belief system on doing these things, easing the process, making these different tasks as easy as possible for people to accomplish. Having the resources out there, like decontamination units, I think is hugely important. If someone can go get it, like Hubbard County here, if someone can go get a complimentary decontamination, they're going to go do it.
You put the hose in with 120-degree water and work around the live well from top to bottom in a circular motion.
Pulling their heartstrings, I think that's a great tactic for making people realize that this is right here. This is in my area, this is in my lake, or this could happen to my lake. Some of these landowners or lake owners, they may have had these places in their families for generations, so that really ties to their tradition. With all of our lakes, we're the land of 10,000 lakes, and actually it's 11,842. And then there are 6,564 rivers and streams. And I like to remind people that only 5% of those are infested. And do we want 100% infested? Some of these won't be suitable habitat for some species like zebra mussels, so maybe they won't get in there. But we want to prevent as many as possible from getting any type of invasive. So when you hear those numbers and you hear, oh, only 5%, it kind of reminds people that, oh yeah, there are other lakes out there. And the major ones, we hear about those major ones, Mille Lacs and Cass and Leech, and they're the most popular, or, the most common ones that people hear of all the time. So if we hear one of those gets infested, just forget all the lakes around them that actually feed into their watersheds. So.
The typical lake country seasons of spring and summer garner a lot of AIS prevention attention, and with good reason. Anglers and recreational boaters make up the bulk of those who use our waters. But aquatic invasive species don't take any seasons off, and to make sure we're doing all we can, we need to be diligent all year round. Even when the weather cools, the ducks start flying and the fall hunting season arrives.
Waterfowl in this area for close to 32 years. I've been doing it since my family was born in this area, so we've hunted all our lives up in this area. All these local waters are a big part of it. it's just something I grew up doing, and hope my kids can do it, you know.
I have been involved with waterfowl hunting in the state of Minnesota since I've been about age 10. Didn't have any mentors really in the waterfowling game. I really started out reading Fur Fish and Game, Sports Afield, and thought it sounded really kind of a neat deal, and I started sneak hunting the creeks when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, single shot shotgun over my shoulder, no waders, freezing, and hopefully getting a mallard or two or whatever species I'd run into.
Every weekend, if I can, during the fall, starting from the first weekend of duck season in late September till now, you know, November.
I hunt 2 states. I hunt every weekend. I don't early goose hunt. I'm not into swatting mosquitoes when I'm hunting ducks, but I hunt every weekend that it's possible. I usually hunt 40 days, 35 days, something like that. Cinder saw the bird before I did.
Leave it.
AIS is affecting my waterfowl hunting because not all of our bodies of water are recreated upon except by waterfowl hunters or wild rice gatherers perhaps. So a person's really got to be aware of transporting, if you hunt a lake that has aquatic invasive species in it, or even if you don't, just transporting vegetation to a water body that wouldn't have it. It's completely isolated, whatever, doesn't get a whole lot of other pressure other than waterfowl season.
But we always make sure we clean our boats, clean our equipment. Even the dog, if he's done a lot of swimming, which today obviously you can see he's quite dry, I make sure he gets combed out, brushed out, because there's all those little seeds and different things that can deposit in their fur and stuff like that too. So I mean, just about anything that touches the water, you need to make sure we've been keeping it clean. Draining everything, make sure it's dry, and try to keep it out as long as possible so it can dry all the way and stuff.
An invasive species is one that is not native to the area, of course, but it's also one that causes some type of harm, whether it be ecological, economic, some type of impact that species is causing by being here. And that's the divider between just a non-native and an invasive, what we would then classify invasive species. There's ones like curly-leaf pondweed, and they say that one's been in the state of Minnesota since 1910 about. Now there's ones like zebra mussels. That one was first found in the Duluth Superior Harbor in 1989, so fairly recent, and then it started moving inland. They're actually native to the Black and Caspian Seas in Europe, and they believe they came in with ballast water. The shipping industry brought them in with ballast water, so that's the same with faucet snails is another one native to that Europe area and brought in. Although other ones they believe were brought in, say, by the horticultural trade. Purple loosestrife, back before it was considered invasive, was a popular garden plant. And then pink water lily, which is an invasive species, pond gardeners like pink water lily, and it's actually okay to possess that, but letting that get out into nature and into another water body is illegal. So there's different routes, but they say the most common route of transport is human activity. And they all have some type of survival tactic, and we have to remember that because they're not native to here, their predators are non-existent. You know, what may eat these over in Europe don't exist over here. So they have a chance to reproduce and then survive, and then reproduce and survive. They say a female zebra mussel can, in each breeding cycle, which they do multiple times in the summer, can reproduce about 40,000 eggs just on one breeding adult. Although we have seen that things are starting to utilize them. You know, they're being found in bellies of waterfowl. They're found that sturgeon are eating them. So, you know, we hope that nature will catch up. And even research, if we slow the spread of invasive species, research and nature can catch up and we'll find some way. We do know it changes the food web. The dynamic has changed because zebra mussels are competing for that same type of food that a smaller fish would need, that a larger fish would need to grow any type of game fish population. So we do know that it changes what's happening in the lake.
When it comes to our precious lakes and rivers, the fight to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species is the struggle of our generation. And we all need to be involved, from anglers to hunters to recreational users and anyone who loves our lakes. To find out how you can do your part to prevent the spread of AIS, visit the online home of the Mississippi Headwaters Board at www.mississippiheadwaters.org. Together, we can stop the spread of aquatic invasives and continue to enjoy our beautiful lakes and rivers for generations to come.
Invasive species affect my duck hunting because, really simple, like a lake like this one that has curly pondweed and faucet or New Zealand mud snails in it, the ecosystem itself has changed. I mean, it also has carp in it, which over the course of the years, the curly pondweed has taken over the lake. It's the only pond or really weed left in it, so it affects the waterfowl hunting. From a point is, the AIS species are replacing the native food sources. Duck hunting wise, it's generally a morning thing in Minnesota, but every weekend, unless the ducks numbers are pretty solid on one body of water, I'm generally moving to a different body of water the next day. So that's why it's imperative to keep, you know, all my decoy anchors and trailer and everything clean, because any plant particles or fragments can survive because it's not freezing out and it's wet or damp, so they can easily be transported.
The biggest one is the decoys, I think, as far as the waterfowl is concerned, because a lot of the lakes or ponds we go to, if you pull up your decoy cord, it's literally tangled in it, and if you're in a hurry, it's easy just to wrap it up in there and put it right in the bag with the rest of the stuff, you know, and the next time it goes right back in the water, and a lot of us go 2-3 days in a row, you know, so it's still fresh and can be replanted back to another body of water. So I think you need to take the time to make sure you actually put away the equipment properly and at least clean it off, you know, and drain it.
Actually, I'm very aware because I'm actually an AIS boat inspector in the summertime. So I see a lot of people not actually maybe necessarily taking the most precautionary measures that they could, but as far as a waterfowl hunter, I'm very aware of it because we're just as possible to spread it as someone else fishing in the summertime or some other recreational boater.
It's very important to educate those coming up to keep it that way, because we are creatures of habit, and if you do it by habit, hopefully it'll carry on.
For future generations, you need to be vigilant. I think from the duck hunting perspective, I think our waterfowl hunters could do better. They don't necessarily take the precautions as they should. They need to, because like I said, they're migratory just as well as the ducks, and they're moving all over the state. And if you ever want to keep your waterfowling heritage such as it is or was, you need to be vigilant in preventing the spread of AIS. All right, after we're finished up waterfowling, the hunting itself was excellent, but the shooting wasn't so great. This lake that we happen to be hunting today actually has aquatic invasive species in it. It has curly pondweed, and it actually had New Zealand mud snails. One of the first things I always do is make sure I get the drain plug pulled. Even this time of year, decoy strings and dogs and everything jumping into the boat, you get a lot of extra lake water. You got wader water and all kinds of stuff that comes in. Make sure you get that plug pulled. Like I said, you have a chance for villagers that potentially haven't settled out yet to be in there. Snails, etc. Make sure you get all that stuff drained out and dried, because ducks are migratory and so are duck hunters. Duck hunters like to jump from lake to lake. This time of year, it's, as you can see, it's kind of overcast and wet. Plants, turions, zebra mussels, anything could survive till tomorrow. This happens to be a Saturday, so guess what? We're going duck hunting tomorrow morning. So you make sure you drain and dry this stuff as good as you can. You want to come up and make sure you check. Most waterfall lakes have got a good abundant vegetation supply in it. As you can see, there's a piece of curly pondweed. Like I said, this lake has curly pondweed in it. And make sure you give a real good eyeball job on the duck boat itself. This side of the boat happens to look pretty good. Now we should move to the transom of the boat, look at the propeller, lower unit, maybe the lower boat rollers, and inspect that for plants and or any other AIS that may be attached. Moving to the rear of the boat, always make sure to check the propeller. And here, again, as a lot of times you'll find a shard of curly pondweed, and all it would take was a fragmentation of this pondweed. Tomorrow morning, going to a new lake doesn't have it, you have a potential for AIS infestation. You can see here on the lower rollers of the boat, here's another piece of the curly pondweed. Generally this time of year, most of this stuff has died out and in its wintering stage, but we've had a warm fall. This is late, almost Halloween, and we're still seeing green curly pondweed floating around in the lake. So, like I said, make sure you take a good thorough look. Moving up to the front of the boat, like I said, make sure you get a good look. Axles, this one happens to have a brake line on it, and we do have some vegetation hanging on here. This happens to be our native Elodea, this stuff, but here's another fragment of curly pondweed laying on the trailer. Make sure you get that all cleaned off. This particular plant actually is Elodea, or Canada waterweed. It's actually a native of Minnesota, but as Minnesota laws indicate, there's no aquatic vegetation that can be transported. So obviously we're going to remove this and deposit it at the landing and leave it be. Before I bag up all the decoys for the day, always look at your main anchor lines. This happens to be a gain line anchor. A lot of times these flukes will be out, and you'll pick up a piece of aquatic plants that'll get stuck in the grapples. There again, if it's going back in the lake tomorrow, you've got a fresh, nice chunk of curly pondweed that's going to end up being in potentially a new body of water that does not have it, and you have a risk of infestation. So make sure to check your anchors and your decoy lines, etc., for any kind of aquatic plants.
Our goal, anyway, is to prevent the spread of that invasive to any other lake. So number one, if a person finds out that their lake has an invasive, they have to be even more diligent on going through the process of cleaning, draining, drying out, decontaminating before they go to any other. And then maybe their lake association could be a bit more involved in, say, an inspection program, so that this doesn't get carried around. Nature, again, it finds its balance, and it just hasn't been here long enough, we believe, for nature to have found any balance. If you find anything suspicious, you want to make sure you maybe take a picture, but take a picture just in case you lose the sample. People are afraid because you can't transport invasive species that they just leave it and then say, well, I found it somewhere. If you're transporting it to an office to give to a specialist to identify, that will be okay. If you bring it to me, that is okay for you to transport it. So a sample will be great. If you don't want to take the sample, take a picture. A location, if you have a GPS, perfect, because I can get right back to it. If you're at an access with an inspector, leave it with the inspector. Any fisheries office nearby, and really any DNR office nearby, if you tell them, I need this to go to the invasive species specialist, they can figure it out. That really kicks in a rapid response. And if we get a report and we consider it a high risk, or it's we see it as a zebra mussel, then it kicks in investigation and inspection, searches in that area, in that entire lake, so that we can hurry up and get that into an infested designation so that it doesn't get spread from that lake to somewhere else.
When it comes to our precious lakes and rivers, the fight to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species is the struggle of our generation. And we all need to be involved, From anglers, to hunters, to recreational users, and anyone who loves our lakes. To find out how you can do your part to prevent the spread of AIS, visit the online home of the Mississippi Headwaters Board at www.mississippiheadwaters.org. Together, we can stop the spread of aquatic invasives and continue to enjoy our beautiful lakes and rivers for generations to come.
I'm here in the beautiful Cuyuna recreational area where you can enjoy fishing, camping, hiking, and all those things in one area. Not to mention world-class mountain biking. Kayaking is one of the fastest growing sports in America. People enjoy doing it. It's low impact to the environment, and it's an enjoyable sport, gets you moving without necessarily spending a lot of energy. So one of the first things we want to do when we look at a kayak, in cleaning a kayak, you want to first look at your paddle. A lot of times your paddle, when going through the water, you can pick up debris. So you just want to do a quick check and make sure aquatic invasive species is not present. The next thing I want to do is I want to check my boat for any aquatic invasive species. Particularly around here. You can see around this edge here. Here's some debris right here that you don't want to see. Maybe I went underneath a tree and I got some junk and some leaves. That could have been aquatics, some things there. So that's part of the clean part. The other part is draining. I want to pull, my kayak has a plug-in back. I want to pull that, and then I want to walk to the front here, and I just want to lift it up. And I get to drain it and wait for all the water to drain out there. So when I flip it over, one of the things you'll know is that the whole bottom side, it may have some aquatic invasives, but what you really want to do is check here and also in the back. It seems that that's where your mud is going to be accumulating, and that's probably the most sensitive points where you can transfer aquatic invasive species. A lot of times I have my own water bottle, or maybe I want to bring my own jug with me, just kind of to rinse it out and just kind of pour it off and make sure it comes out. I might have to wash it off or do that. Maybe use half my towel here as I pour it on, just to kind of wipe it off. Make sure there's no leftovers, no more debris, so I have a nice clean boat and that won't transfer aquatic invasives. So one of the reasons I like to clean off my boat is because I want to teach others that this is the right thing to do. And we want to show respect for the natural resources, so I like to clean my boat at every time I pull out, regardless if it's infected. We want to treat our natural resources with respect, and we want to preserve it for future generations. There's a lot of things we can do with kayaking and some of these other things that we can also help to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. With your help, everyone can be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. We are at the greatest point in Minnesota history to make a difference. There's political will to work on aquatic invasive species. There's funding coming from the state. There's local counties doing their part with inspectors and decontamination units. There's the Department of Natural Resources working on this. And there's the University of Minnesota doing research, which just isn't focusing on what's here now, but what could be coming in the future. All the pieces are together to make this thing happen and to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. What we need is you.
Once you get invasive species in a lake, that lake becomes less desirable and affects property values, affects tourism. The whole economy really revolves around lakes, and that's a lot of Minnesota. So
it's something that, you know, we all got to get on top of, and we all got to work together, because it only takes one boat going from one lake that has it into a lake that doesn't, and boom.
It's huge here in Minnesota just to have, you know, nice, clean, accessible lakes, because if there's milfoil and zebra mussels, it takes away from that experience. And, you know, that's why it's so important to protect our lakes. You know, as time goes on, we keep finding out more and more how it's, you know, affecting all the fish in the lake, and it's affecting the swimming, you know, people stepping on them, and, you know, the boating, everything. It really affects the lake experience in general. And, you know, if we can prevent that just by taking these small steps of making sure that your boat's clean and dry when you're transporting it, I mean, it's really worth it to do. You know, it's scary to think about, because I think of the times we have with our friends and family when we're swimming, you know, down on the beach, or we're out, you know, fishing or something like that. And to take that experience down a notch is kind of a tough thing to think about.
There are more invasive species out there than what we have. So, you know, one of the goals of our program is to prevent the introduction of any new invasive species, and they're on the horizon. There are neighboring states that have things that if it got into our ecosystems, who knows what havoc they would wreak. I don't see, you know, gloom and doom, as we talked about. I see type of a management route to the things that are here, and making sure nothing new comes.
I think the thing that's really tough to kind of slow down or hopefully be able to stop the invasive species is just, you know, people taking the time. You know, everyone's in a rush nowadays, and it's like, you know, just take that time to go through the steps to prevent this. I mean, because, you know, once all the lakes have them, you can't really go back, as far as I know. And, you know, so you kind of got this one shot to do it right. So it's just do that. And that's, I think, the problem is people are, you know, they're either don't want to put in the time to do that, or they're in a hurry or something like that, and it gets overlooked. And it's something that, you know, you can't overlook.
This program was brought to you by the Mississippi Headwaters Board, which encourages you to protect and enjoy our natural resources. For more information, please go to MississippiHeadwaters.org/AIS to find out more about what your local county is doing to protect our resources.